All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Inside In Tennis Podcast. Mitch Michals here on the Believe Network. A lot of great content, a lot of great stuff for you, for your ears. This tennis season has been great. This show is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, so you want to make sure you subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your shows. Into mid-February, lots of great tennis in the Middle East. Joined now by friend of the show, hardest working woman in show business, former Tennis Channel, well, as of last week, she was calling matches, some great finals all through at Tennis Channel's airwaves. It's Andrea Petkovic back on the show. Andrea, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Mitch, thank you for having me. I don't have the same quality microphone as you. In fact, it's only my MacBook, but we'll make it through it together.
Okay, well, no, it's the thought that counts. And really,
exactly.
As we were talking before, I saved a special piece of artwork for you, the sign over my left shoulder. As I'm looking at it, is never underestimate a lady that plays tennis. We would never underestimate you on this show, so got that covered.
But you should never underestimate a woman who plays tennis. I agree with that sign.
Yeah, and someone as yourself, right, like that stays busy, that has been doing so much since you retired. We've been talking on the show for a few years now. Is it getting a little weirder, more comfortable as the years, pile up since you played? Are you kind of becoming more and more at peace with being a former pro tennis player?
I am. So personally, I'm so glad I'm retired, and that has not so much to do with me, but more with how the tennis and the level of tennis has progressed. I was watching a few of the matches at the Australian Open courtside, and I was just really blown away by the pace and the quality. And I was so glad I was retired and I didn't have to compete with these women. I felt like it was a bit easier when I was still playing. So that's what part of the reason. And the other part is that I really find a lot of fulfillment in what I do now. And I still love tennis and I'm still able to be part of it, just in a different role.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, not to completely gas you up, but there's a lot of things that you've been excelling at in post-retirement. I felt like watching some of those Australian Open matches courtside. That was kind of a natural role for you as a player. You're on the court. You're as close as you can be to in the fight, in the match without playing. What was that specific experience like, and how's it been being courtside? You got to keep your voice down low so the players don't hear everything. But what's that been like?
Man, it's the best. It really is. Every time I get the courtside assignment, I am the happiest cucumber of all. It's because exactly as you said, you have the best seat in the house. You are right there. You see the pace, you see the exertion of the players. But then again, you have to come in only every 3-4 games so you can really zone in on the tennis, because a lot of times, especially when the match is not great, you're also trying to make it interesting for the audience. You're trying to explain maybe why is it not great, what are the conditions, and so you don't zone in quite as much as when you're courtside and you have two announcers calling the match and you just come in every third game. You're like, well, now the wind is blowing from the northwest. So it's really, really awesome. If I didn't have to interview the players, that would be even better. Usually it's my favorite place in the world.
It's like end of the match. I mean, if it's second set, you're like, okay, I got an idea who, and then does the panic set in? It's like, all right, now I got to start thinking of questions.
Yeah,
and then there's a comeback, probably.
Exactly. So the moment I know and I have the questions ready and I have one player prepped, usually that's exactly when the match turns and I have to interview the other. But yeah, it's so complete. The encore, I actually enjoy talking to the players. I did a few interviews where we just sit down. There's a camera. I have a couple of questions. That's a completely different setting because you just want to have a conversation with the player about tennis. That's something I would do in the locker room too,
Yeah.
So that's not complicated. I think the problem with the on-court interviews is that you're catering to 3 different parties, really. You have a producer in your ear, as you know, working for a TV channel. You have a producer in your ear who wants to get sound bites in 2.5 minutes, if possible, that he can play out in a show or wherever they need them for, right? Then you have the audience that wants to be entertained and wants to get a glimpse of the personality of the player, that wants to get to know them. It's an Australian audience. They don't have tennis in Australia that much, only that 1 month. So they want you to do that. And then, of course, and that's the most important for me, and I'm not as cold-hearted now to not care about what the player thinks. I'm still a player in my mind. And the player who has played 3-4 hours wants to get to the locker room, wants to get their recovery started. And I feel for them. And I'm like, I really don't want to ask you this, but I have a producer yelling in my ear and I need to. So if I can get more cold-hearted, to be like, I'm the media now and I don't care about how you feel, that would be great, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, there's lesson number one of the day, kids. Get more cold-hearted, as Andrea says it. So, no, it was another great Australia. We recapped it on the show and discussed it, but I did want to ask you, as another prominent member of the German Tennis Federation, what was it like seeing someone that you worked with, Eva Lys, go on that run from lucky loser to not knowing she was going to even get a chance to play in the main draw to the fourth round at the Australian Open, a life-changing result?
Yeah, that was so great. And she just played really well in Dubai, qualified, won a round, and then lost, who did she lose to?
Paulini.
Yeah, exactly, Paulini. Yeah. So she had another great run, but it was so great and so interesting and bizarre at the same time, because on one hand, I've known her for so long. I've known of her talent and potential and what she can do. And then seeing her thrive and be in the center of attention in Australia, and the Australians love an underdog story. So she was really plastered all over, and them having, watching them getting to know her was so fun. They're like, oh, she's so fun. I was like, yeah, I know, I told you this, but nobody listened to me before when she didn't have these results. Yeah. So that was super, super great and really important, honestly, for German tennis, because except for Alexander Zverev, who probably has back pain by now from carrying the German tennis in the last few years, we didn't really have great results other than that. So this was really important to have a woman also do well and go far at the Australian Open.
They were singing songs to her in the crowd. They were chanting Eva Lys Vegas was another one that I heard.
That was good, yeah.
It was funny. They do have an underdog. And also, and you can speak to this too, like as a player, there's got to be some freedom when you get into the tournament last minute where you're not even thinking about the pressure. You're just playing. You just don't have time to really process it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually always really bad as a lucky loser because I overthought all the scenarios before, and I didn't get in many times as a lucky loser, but a few times, and I didn't play well. But Eva was so good. She was just actually, she also found out only 10 minutes before she had to go on court. And I watched that match. I was there in the stands watching the match, and she had so much energy, so much joy. And that's the most important for anybody, but particularly for Eva, who plays with so much emotion and passion for the game. She had so much joy because she already saw herself in the airplane back to Germany. So being out there in the sun, on a big court, she played Kimberell on Kia Arena, big court, and just seeing the joy she had for the game made me so happy. And I think that's also what got her through these 3 rounds and then into the 4th round of the Australian Open.
It was exciting to see. It's always cool. You never know when these life-changing moments can happen. Players are ready, and as fans, we just like and appreciate when somebody gets that big breakthrough. That's a great segue for what you called was an exceptional event on the women's side in Doha. That was a final we didn't predict. It was Anisimova and Ostapenko, and Amanda Anisimova gets her biggest title of her career into the top 20. She wins Doha. Andrea, she's a premier level champion now. Still so very young, I keep reminding myself, but how she has gotten through all the events in her life on court and off court, how she stayed in the game, how she rediscovered her love for it, and how she showed everybody she has the game to back up all this potential too. It was a very inspiring run and a very methodical run. Had to win in a couple different ways, but at the end of the day, she's the one holding the trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this was, I didn't know it was going to be the outcome, but it was maybe my favorite outcome of all, just because, as you had just mentioned, she had so much hardship in her very young career with losing her dad so early on. But not only that, then going through mental health struggles and just being overwhelmed by the pressures of the tour. And I think that's something we can all identify with, whether we have taken the pause or not. And having her take this pause, do other things, take a few college courses, work on herself and as a personality off the court as well, really gave her the strength to pull this win off and go even further. And you mentioned it, and I really think I'm going to talk about her tennis in a moment, but I really think this could be a career-defining moment for her, not only because it's the biggest title of her career, of course it is, but now she's in the top 20. Now she will be seated at all the major tournaments. And we know that Amanda possesses this big game that can take anybody out. We saw it early on in her career. And now she won't have to grind through the first rounds where she meets a Sabalenka in the first round, or where she gets a Badosa in the second round. Now she will be seeded. Now she will potentially have a few easier opponents. And then once she gets going and once she gets on a roll, and this was very obvious in Doha, once she gets on a roll, she can beat anybody in the world. And I think the WTA tour and the world in general will be a better tour when Amanda Anisimova is going far in major tournaments, as she already did before. And so that's why I think this was so important, not only for her, but for the tour as well. And then in terms of tennis, she's improved so much. Her forehand has a bit more margin on. There is more spin. She doesn't get as nervous as she used to get. She closed out matches beautifully. So much percentage tennis. She kept it nice and simple in important moments. When she did get nervous, just served wide into the open corner. And even if you know it, there's not much you can do. She plays so fast. And of course, that backhand down the line is just a thing of a beauty and was as good as ever. So this was a very impressive, very inspiring run by Amanda.
Yeah, that Kostuk win in the quarterfinals. It was a brutally hot, humid day. She was, struggling out there, finding a way to win that, reset Alexandrova, then Ostapenko. And also, great point you just made. That final, it was a rainy, disjointed match. That's another opportunity for your head to kind of wander, your game to dip, but she just played very methodical and impressive. Beating big players and good players isn't new to her. Like, even in her struggles, she's possessed the game, as you said. Roland Garros semifinals as a 17-year-old, beat Sabalenka a few times, has these big wins. But if she finds this consistency, I've always said, Andrea, you could walk onto the practice court and some players will just stand out. She's one of them. Like, you see her hit a tennis ball, just hit it. It's a thing of beauty.
Yeah, and I think the sound, particularly if you can ever get yourself to a Amanda Anisimova match and she just crushes the backhand, just if you close your eyes and listen to how she connects to the ball, it's just, it's just a thing of beauty. And having her see that all through and it all come together. And you mentioned it. I think that match against Marta Kostyuk was really the most important one. It felt after that she was freed. And I will say one thing. Some people were like, oh, the final was not great. These players played incredible considering the circumstances. As you said, it kept raining. It was windy as hell. And it was cold. You could see people in the stands in winter jackets and shawls above their head. And it was insane that these players were even able to pull off that quality of tennis. So I was very impressed.
Yeah, tough for both the finalists to have to go right to Dubai and play, going out early. It's a lot. It's a lot, to have to go back to the court, especially in Amanda's case after such a huge win. Ostapenko, I mean, the Jelena Ostapenko experience, it's never a dull moment. And another win over Iga, so a heck of a tournament run. But it's always exciting watching Ostapenko play.
It's so fun. I love watching her play. I know some people find her a bit intense, but I love watching her play. Again, she sent out a few people from her box, then they came back, and then she did, what Jelena Ostapenko does, cracked a bunch of winners in light speed. But that Iga Swiatek win, again, now she's 5-0 in the head-to-head versus Iga. It's the only player that has this positive of a head-to-head against Iga Swiatek, one of the best players of the last 5-6 years. That's incredible. And it's just a bad matchup for Iga. There's just so much pace.
Is it because it's the pace, but is it, and I'll let you finish, but is it because Iga is such a rhythm player? She just never feels comfortable. She's never able to play her game, so to speak, against Jelena.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. There are two things. So from Jelena's perspective, Jelena is a little bit different than most women. Like their preferred strike zone is around hip high. For Jelena Ostapenko, it's actually a bit higher. Not too much higher, but maybe an inch higher. And that's exactly what Iga Swiatek's ball is. It jumps a bit higher because she has that topspin. So Jelena already feels incredibly comfortable. The second serve of Iga's, that kick serve, that is actually quite complicated to return for most women because it really jumps high. jumps in exactly the right spot where Jelena Ostapenko wants it. And Ostapenko already is one of the best returners, most aggressive returners on the tour. So she takes time away from Iga right away. And then on the other hand, exactly at what you said, Ostapenko has the game that Swiatek does not like. We talked about it many times before, and she's made so much progress against ball bashers, quote unquote, against big hitting women. She beat Noskova, she beat Rybakina now twice in a row already. So she has made progress against these big hitting women, but they are still the ones that tend to bother her. And Ostapenko clearly has the game that is just uncomfortable for Iga. And I saw a little bit of a regression in that match for Iga, just because she went back to trying to outbash a ball basher, which is not really her game. And she did so well in the previous two matches against Noskova and Rybakina to calm the game down as well, put a bit of height on the ball, and she wasn't able to do so against Ostapenko. And maybe next time, she will not stop until she gets that win over Ostapenko.
It's a great breakdown, perfectly said, about why Iga struggles. Listeners and viewers, there'll be a test, so hopefully you study properly. Andrea will be an easy grader, I think. But no, it's perfect to see. Well, we got more champions from last week, and the talk of the tour on the men's side, I think it's safe to say, has been Joao Fonseca.
Yeah.
What he's done to start this year, gets his first title in Brazil, one of only a handful of young teenage champions this century on the ATP Tour. He wins Argentina. He's about to play Brazil this week, but he wins Buenos Aires. He takes out a lot of Argentinian players on the way.
All of them. I think all of them.
This thing is a real buzz, a real movement, as I said last week, but I am stunned with how mature and how match tough he is, because, Andrea, it's also safe to say he didn't play his best tennis. And to win at a performance of guts and mental maturity like this is just stunning. I was floored yet again by this kid's performance.
You're so right. I was so impressed the entire time, and exactly what you said, just because he was struggling in some of the matches. If you think about the semis and the final, he was up a set and a break on Jere in the semis, had the chance to serve it out, couldn't do it, loses the second set in a close battle, and then just comes out struggling physically. I think he had lower back issues, struggling physically, comes back and wins the third set 6-1. Again, the same thing in the final. Is up 6-3, 5-3, has the chance to serve the match out, doesn't do it. Has another chance to serve the match out, doesn't do it, and then wins it in a tiebreak. And these moments, they define the great players, and they are the differentiator between good players and great players. Because, having that tightness and that tension and getting nervous, but then be able to bounce back from it, having that short-term memory is probably his most and biggest asset that he has, because we all know what he can do on the tennis court. We've been talking about it for a year. That forehand, that backhand, he doesn't really have a weakness. The only weakness he has, and that's probably a strength, is the exuberance of youth. He sometimes gets overexcited and overplays the forehand, but that's really not a weakness. That's almost more a strength than a weakness. That's the only thing he has. And I think the only thing I hope and wish for him, Brazil is so excited about Joao, as they should be. He has a tremendous career ahead of him. But, all this expectation and passion, he is only 18 years old. And you can still tell that he's 18 years old. When you hear him speak, he's so humble, he's so young. I just hope that they give him the time to evolve as a personality and as a tennis player, because if he does that, the next 10, 15 years will be a Fonseca decade amongst Sinner and Alcaraz, of course, and he will win multiple major tournaments. But I just hope he doesn't get overwhelmed by the expectations that are now on him.
The final match against Cerundolo, everything you said accurate. Also, he's playing an Argentinian on their home turf.
Yes.
So he basically won like a road tournament for his first tournament title. But to overcome all the adversity of not serving it out while you have the crowd going crazy, he said he was serving through it. He's like, I'm not going to get him to quiet. And look, we've seen players, even Zverev a little bit, where the crowd kind of got on him, and it was tough for him to adjust to that. He just found a way to win. He found a way to Fonseca to keep playing tough, keep playing his best, or bring out his best in that tiebreaker after not playing well. The Navoni quarterfinal, it's 5-2 match point down.
Yes.
He wins 5 straight games.
Exactly.
It's exciting. And you're 100% bang on with the timeline. I think what happens as fans of sports in general, certainly tennis, they see the new big thing, and he is clearly as good as advertised. But we speed up our expectations. We speed up the timeline. I think it's safe to say, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 years or so is when I was thinking, okay, by the time he's 20-ish, maybe he'll be ahead of that. But that's a reasonable time to think, okay, he's contending in majors. Because if you think about Alcaraz was light years fast. Sinner, though, it took time. He's going to have to get used to playing the very best in the game and also losing to the very best in the game. I think we're all on the same page, Andre, that he's going to get there. But I don't think it's fair to expect that right away, just given what we've seen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to note that at the Australian Open earlier this year, when he beat Rublev and already put a big exclamation point on his career and what's to come, it was the first time he ever played a best of five match, right? This is the person we are talking about. This young kid is the first time a couple of months ago that he's played a best of five. And so that's all I need people to do is to calm down and just give him the time.
Could you imagine? I mean, I don't know if it was like this in your case, but just getting famous. I know Brazil's been thirsty for a tennis champion since Curtin, and there was that awesome photo of those two together, which is why you have role models in your country to grow the game. But I can't comprehend what it's like for him right now to get famous essentially overnight, this famous.
I wouldn't be able to tell you. I think the only two people that I know personally that have experienced similar things is Emma Raducanu, of course, who really became even crazier because I think everyone on the inside of tennis and who follows sports sort of expected Joao Fonseca to do special things, and he has done them already. But Emma Raducanu really came out of nowhere. So for Emma, that was the case. And I mean, I know him well. Boris Becker was a similar case when he won Wimbledon as a teenager. That was sort of out of nowhere. And when he came back to Germany, he saw life has changed. And literally every single person in Germany, he was more famous than the Pope in Germany. Every single person knew him. So I think that's really hard to contend with. I don't know what it's like, but we saw Emma, we saw Boris struggle with it. And I just hope people give him the time to evolve as a person as well as a tennis player, because I can't wait to watch him battle out in the semis and finals of major tournaments. And he has this beautiful joy, similar to Sinner and Alcaraz. They all three, in their own very unique ways, have this zest and joy for the sport. And I think that translates to the audience. And I think that's why they are so beloved already.
Certainly is. Can't wait to see. Just the last note on this too. Love the Golden Swing crowds. I think there's a time and place. This is the time and place. It's good to see the rowdiness. And some players are going to like it. I don't know where you are on the scale. Some players are going to like it and some maybe not so much.
I always liked it, so I always mention it. I played Fed Cup against Simona Halep when she was number 2 in the world, maybe even number 1 in the world. And we played in Cluj-Napoca, and it was 10,000 Romanian fans. And I will never forget, I missed this is the first point of the match. I missed my first serve. I didn't even miss my second serve yet. I missed my first serve, and 10,000 people erupted into cheers as if Simona had just won the Australian Open. And I thought to myself, okay, this is going to be rough, but I quite enjoyed it, I have to say. Yes, they were against me. Yes, it was rowdy. But now looking back at it, having been retired for 2 years, it's one of the more memorable matches I played, just because it was so different and so much adversity to overcome. And that's what you remember when you retire, are those crazy matches that are not like all the other matches you've played.
We got more here with Andrea Petkovic on the Inside in Tennis podcast. It's a lot going on. It's February, but there's still so much tennis, so many storylines. The game and the excitement and the drama continue to ramp up. Other champions this week I just wanted to mention. You had Ugo Humbert winning again on hard court indoor at home, winning in Marseille. He's got quite an advantage. He beats Medjedovic in that final. And then you had Kekmanovic, another Serbian, defeat Davidovich Fokina, which, if we're talking hard losses.
Oh, my God.
Last time you were on the show, we were talking about, I think it was the Offner match where it was, just a total. This is a final we're talking about in Delray Beach. Kekmanovic wins his second career title. Fokina doesn't have one. 5-2, double match point, and loses that match. It's a tough one to get over. Credit to Kekmanovic, but that's the agony of defeat in the sport you grew up with.
Mitch, honestly, I don't know. Has he retired already? Because that was heartbreaking. And particularly because we had Mark Petchey call the match with Paul Anacon and they were mentioning it. He has the monkey on the back that people, his locker room reputation is to get nervous, Davidovich Fokinas. People expect him to get nervous when he serves for the match. And having those two match points, and I actually thought he did tremendously well to get to those match points. I thought he was going to get nervous way more before, and he didn't. And I will say it was unlucky, the match points. He ripped the forehand down the line. It missed by a quarter of an inch, and then Kecmanovic came to the net and he hit the net court on a volley. It was a simple volley, but he hit the net court. And I mean, I will say, Miomir, he is Serbian. I have Serbian roots. Serbians are tough, man. You know, they see the situation at hand, and he just freaking dialed in and did not miss a single ball anymore. And on one hand, I'm rooting for him because I know him and I want him to do well. On the other hand, my heart is breaking for Davidovich Fokina, and I'm just thinking, if he doesn't get over the finish line, I don't know what he will do afterwards. I think he will throw his rackets in the ocean. But that's Serbians, you know, they learned from the best, they learned from Djokovic, and he just focused in. I don't think he missed a single ball anymore until the end of the match. And so he didn't give him any chances, really, Davidovich Fokinas, and that was it in the end.
Kecmanovic is in very elite shape, underrated, I would say. He moves very well. Had one of the funniest quotes on Second Serve last week, where they asked him what his goals were for the next couple weeks, and he said to win as much as possible. Thought that was just a good goal for any tennis player to have.
Yes.
But no, I hope Fokina is able to get the monkey off of his back, and whether it's a small tournament or a bigger one, he's got the game. He plays so well, even on hard courts. But yeah, until you do it, you can't. You have to prove yourself at this point. So we'll see. On the other side, though, Andrea, you have, like I said, Bear winning that tournament. Medjedovic, another Serbian guy. I think there's like 5 now in the top 100 or so. But he gets to a final. He beats Medvedev on the way there. So I thought that was an impressive run from a young player who's clearly playing his best tennis as well.
Yeah, and he's matured so much. He's very young, as you said. And I watched him actually 3 years ago in the qualies of the French Open. And he was, you know, it was very dramatic how he played. Every shot was accompanied by sighs and emotions and reactions and falling down on the floor. I mean, anybody who's known me as a player knows that I'm not adverse to drama at all. And I felt very much at home watching Medjedovic. But now seeing him on his run in Marseille, I thought he was very much mature, still emotional player, but using the emotions to his benefit. Huge forehand, beautiful game. And he had chances in that final against Hugo, had a set point in the first set at 5-4 and 30-40. Hugo with that wide stance on the ad side. If you haven't seen it yet, I urge you to just check out a YouTube video. So he's now going out on the ad side almost completely to the sideline of the beginning of the doubles court. And the first time I saw him do it live was at the United Cup, and he actually got called foot fault on it a few times because he stepped over the sideline, not over the line in front of him. Yeah. So now he has slightly adjusted that. He's not as far any longer, but it's really hard to break him. And he was serving tremendously throughout the whole tournament. I think in the semis didn't even face a break point. So he just put indoor French tournament and Hugo Humbert in one sentence. And you will have a champion. Yes.
Yeah. And now I'm picturing you watching Medjedovic like that, the meme online of Leonardo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where you're just pointing at the screen. Like, I know that.
100%. That was me with the can of beer in hand and just going.
Yeah, gotta be German beer, of course.
Yes.
We talked about Medjedovic. He's actually in a battle right now with Tsitsipas, so still playing well. They're deep in the mid third set as we record this, but. You know, the guy he beat, Medvedev, has been struggling. Medvedev in the semifinals. Medvedev pulled out a win over last year's champ as we, get to Dubai or Doha right now for the men. He pulled out a tough match after losing the first set, struggling, and his post-match interview was so fascinating because, and you can speak on this as well, but he said he does something that tennis players don't do. He just went full racket change, not similar change, different change mid-match, went to the power racket as he described it. And he said, look, some days I hit that racket and I can't get a ball in the court. Today it worked out for me. He went into, kind of a diatribe about courts and balls and all that, but just focusing on the racket change. How rare is it for a player mid-match to go full 180, play with an entirely different type of racket in a big match?
Man, Mitch, I mean, I touched on it in the beginning of when you asked me, how are you doing with your retirement? And I said, I'm so happy to not have to compete with these players right now. And I mean it. And one of the reasons I mean it, in my time, and just as a reminder, I retired 2 years ago. I didn't retire 25 decades ago.
It's like dog years.
Exactly.
Like
it feels like it. It really feels like it, because when I played 2 years ago, it was unthinkable that players would change rackets. That was just not a thing you did. I remember Caroline Wozniacki as a number one changed from Babola to Yonex, and everyone was like, is she crazy? She dropped to 70 in the world, changed back, then came back to the top 10. It was a whole thing, and people were like shocked that she had done it. This year, I can name 5 players that changed rackets, from Hubert Hurkacz to Alexander Zverev to, very famously, Madison Keys, who won the Australian Open with a changed racket, many more. One of them, Daniil Medvedev, who is still looking for that perfect racket. But this is what I speak of when I say tennis has changed. These players are more courageous. They are experimenting more. They are really going into the very last inch of possibilities of developing their game. And to me, unthinkable to do something like this. Clearly, it worked out for him. And I love myself a little Daniil Medvedev interview moment. So whenever he has the mic in front of him, something good will come out of it.
I wonder too if this is kind of where we're going in terms of, look, there's the tennis ball issue. Way contracts work. I don't know how we fix that, quite honestly. Courts are different. Players are talking about different speeds. You have the metric every year, tournament to tournament, year over. They play different now, I think we've seen. So I'm just wondering if we're going to get to a point where this is going to be the norm in a couple of years where, you just bring a bunch of rackets, you see how it plays, you make switches mid-match. I don't know. I feel like the evolution of tennis might be heading in this direction, and I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it just yet.
I'm not sure either. I mean, it would be great for the racket companies, right? If you now need 5 different kinds of rackets, one for hard, one for the clay, one for California sun, one for Eastern Coast sun. So that would be great for the manufacturers. And I think you're right. I think that might be maybe not in a couple of years, but let's take 10 years from now, maybe players will have a different racket for every single different condition and every single temperature. Like what we used to do with stringing, right? That's what our thing was. Oh, you go to Indian Wells, you go a bit higher in tension. Oh, you're coming back to Miami, you go a bit lower. Now they just changed the frame. They just go full ahead. It's like, this is kind of a was move from you to just change the string. I'm going to change the whole racket.
Hey, you never know where tennis or sport could go. We never thought probably 10, 15 years ago there'd be a bunch of nose strips of guys just wearing that stuff they're breathing, and now it's become a thing. Well, a couple more things here with Andrea Petkovic on the Inside in Tennis podcast. I did want to mention what has gone on in the news. The biggest story off the court, Jannik Sinner, 3-month suspension. It's starting now, so he will be back in time for the ATP Rome event. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of dialogue. We don't have to recap everything. There's players, there's fans, there's media. There's all sorts of dialogue on this, varying degrees. The first thing I did want to mention is in the report, in every report we've seen, it says he did not dope. WADA even acknowledges that. The question is negligence. The question is the timing of this. And honestly, there is the fact that if you have resources, money, to get the best possible defense, just like with the court of law, you're going to get better service. You're going to get better results probably as a result of that. So all that said, Andrea, and looking at everything that's out there, do you have a reaction that we can maybe finally put this to bed? Your final thoughts on Sinner, 3-month suspension starting now, going up until the Italian Open?
I wish, Mitch, that now with whatever I say in the next 5 minutes, the thing would just be laid to rest. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. But I will say so many things. I think I can't stop myself, and I won't stop myself repeating because a lot of preferential treatment vocabulary is being thrown around. When the initial scientists decided that Jannik Sinner has not doped, not cheated, did not have any performance-enhancing things in his system, he had something in his system. I remind listeners, 1 billionth of a gram of anything close to performance-enhancing. they did not know that they are ruling on Jannik Sinner. I think that's so important to remember. So 3 to 4 different scientists and experts are presented with a case anonymously. They don't know who they are looking at. They just decide based on the facts. So this has been done 1 year ago, right? And as you said, Mitch, why WADA has appealed is because they are saying, and this is a problem for WADA really, because in their statutes it says you're responsible for your team. So if they let Jannik Sinner off, they now have to contend with the fact that every single player that possibly gets tested positive will be like, well, it wasn't me, it was my doctor. It wasn't me, it was my coach. It wasn't me, it was my physio. And they are in problems. So this is a strictly political decision. WADA has a win. Jannik Sinner has a win because the smallest amount of a punishment they can give him is 1 year. So Jannik now has to go through the whole process of CAS to show that he's at no fault. And if he loses that, he still gets a year. So this is a compromise. And I said it on TC Live. I'm going to repeat myself. In my opinion, this is a political decision. In Germany, we have a lot of parties. And usually one party wants one thing, the other party wants another thing. And then a compromise is found and nobody is happy. And
similar
this is
here.
how
It's similar in America too.
Yes.
And to go off of that too, this would have been drawn out. Like I know the timing of it, April.
Yes.
He could appeal. It could go past U.S. Open. So if it's when the 3 months are served, because we're talking about the major season, that's why a lot of this is out there. Why it's unfair is in the minds of many is because of not missing majors with this result. WADA said when a compromise is made, it just serves immediately. You don't start right when the scheduled dates are. You know, the other side of this too, and I think Novak Djokovic spoke on it and was pretty fair, said that he doesn't think that he doped, like a lot of Jannik Sinner's friends have been coming to his defense, which I expect. But he said there is a lack of trust. There is a lack of transparency in some ways. I think there's all fair critiques.
Yeah.
The person that I thought's been the best on this, and unfortunately she got dealt a bad hand with all this, is Tara Moore, the British player. I think that if this is progress, that is a good thing, and we should be able to kind of embrace progress and change. The problem is, and there is a perception out there, that what happens, will the next player be able to get treated like this? And I sincerely hope that they are. I hope that we get to a point where we're not going to make the process drawn out. Simona Halep, it took forever to even get a resolution, and by then you can't make up time lost.
Yeah.
So I hope we're getting to the form of progress. I know there's going to be sour grapes because Sinner's been winning a lot. I think that's part of it too.
100%. Yeah.
But I do think that there are fair sentiments to say he's not a doper. He didn't do anything malicious, but the punishment doesn't line up with things in the past. I think that's fair to kind of review.
Yeah. And I think that's really because if we talk about, there's, as with all these complicated things, there is nuance to it. When experts decided that he hasn't doped and he doesn't have performance enhancing drugs in his system, there was no preferential treatment. They didn't know it was Jannik Sinner. Now you can argue, I wouldn't say preferential treatment, but now this reasoning and this settlement has been found because he's Jannik Sinner, because WADA would embarrass themselves if this was, as you said, drawn out. And in the end, the CAS rules, it's no fault. Yeah. And then WADA has dragged this poor player through all this dirt when the decision was made in the beginning. And if it's Tara Moore, people wouldn't care, but because it's Jannik Sinner, people will care. Yeah. So WADA is risking being embarrassed in front of the whole world. And so that's I don't want to say preferential treatment because we are still banning a kid that everyone has ruled on he didn't dope, right? So how is that preferential treatment? But it's because it's Jannik Sinner. That's why the settlement was found. And that's absolutely the case.
Just want to also point out, in terms of WADA and what you think about the organization, in UFC, Ultimate Fighting, Mixed Martial Arts, they no longer work with WADA. They found that the relationship wasn't working together. So they moved on from them. I just hear things like what Aryna Sabalenka said the other day, where it's like, we're nervous now. I got to be watching my... And I just don't think... It's a bigger discussion, but I don't think anti-doping, which I'm for, a clean sport, 100,000%. I don't think catching a billionth of a substance is what it should be designed to do.
Well, and Mark Petchey said to me, I haven't double checked that, but I'm just going to put it on him. If it's wrong, it's him. Yeah. Mark Petchey said to me just before I left LA, he told me that supposedly WADA is changing their rules in 2027 because of Iga Swiatek and because of Jannik Sinner, because, as you mentioned, a billionth of a gram of contamination was found in the system. And now the reputations are at the lines of these players that are ruled by many experts not to have doped. And exactly what you say, these two players are positive, and I'm putting quote marks, are positive examples of getting away with the most minimal punishment possible. But you have a Tara Moore, you have a Simona Halep, you have all these players who didn't get away with it, and they are just been left by the side of the street, and that's the sad part. And I hope that with this rule change, this won't happen anymore, and we'll go after those people who are trying intentionally to cheat, and not the people who have accidentally eaten meat in Argentina and now have clusterball in their system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, whether it's age, being a little older, or not having the resources, it can be tough. Gotta say, though, the kid Sinner's ability to compartmentalize is pretty strong, because he was able to win Australia again.
And also, think about it. If people really think he doped, I just say he continued to play exactly the same.
There'd be a dip. Yeah, there'd be a dip.
Exactly. If he gets caught doping and then continues to dope, man, this guy's a psychopath. I don't think that's the case, So just funny. He continued to do exceptionally well before and after, and I think that should be reason enough to believe that there is nothing to it.
Hope that's the case, and I hope we can all just move on. I think it'll be longer for some than others, but we'll see. Well, we're going to wind things down here on the Inside in Tennis podcast with Andrea Petkovic, talking about some of the tournaments and results we've got this week already. They kind of did the switch. So Doha, Dubai, we're just going to do a little handoff here where the men are in Doha and the women are in Dubai. On the men's side, there was a couple big results today, the biggest being Matteo Berrettini defeats Novak Djokovic for the first time in his career. Fifth try gets him in straight sets. Djokovic's first match since the loss at the semifinal, the retirement against Zverev, and coming back from that injury. But for Berrettini, and starting on that front, Andrea, he looked electric. He was moving well, a guy who's dealt with a lot of injuries, and his backhand held up. And that's been the part of this matchup that's broken down, like a lot of players against Novak, but it held firm today.
Yeah, it did. No, he was super good. I was very surprised. And I think the one thing I always look for when I see Matteo is playing is the movement. Exactly as you said, we know that he has huge ground strokes, huge forehand, huge serve. On the backhand can struggle a bit, but today was quite solid on that side. And then again, also on the other side, Novak, we don't know when he was able to start practicing with that muscle tear he had in his thigh. So maybe a bit early, the comeback. I don't know. We will see whether he says something on it or whether he just needs a bit of time in the competition side, and he's already doing really well in training. That's sometimes also the case when you come back from injury. Sometimes you're already doing tremendously well in training, and it just takes a while in competition. I'm not worried about Novak. I thought he played so well at the Australian Open, that match against Carlos. Some people wanted to put this one on Carlos. I just thought he was outplayed by Novak. I didn't think he played so badly. And so I'm not worried about Novak at all in terms of tennis, just worried about his health. And if he's healthy, he will be fine. And good to see Matteo playing well again.
Novak is playing doubles, the last tournament ever with Fernando Verdasco. So they're still on the court there. Yeah, it'll be good to see Novak on court. He deals with rust a certain way. It's all about ramping up for the slams, which we know. Berrettini just, having the win, getting back. And he's got this, and I think he's the top overall seed in our in the Nothing Majors hot guy bracket. So, so could do very well there too. And then the other players here, the other player I wanted to mention, Carlos Alcaraz is here. Top overall seed left in this event, or it was the top overall seed in this event, given Sinner not playing, Novak out. He's got a chance along with Alex Zverev. It'd be a tall task, but there's an opportunity to chase down that number one ranking for Alcaraz. So I don't know, Andrea, if that's the goal, if that's the mindset, because like Djokovic, he has bigger things in store, but there is an opening here with Sinner not playing for 3 months.
Yeah, there's an opening. So I think Zverev has 900 points to defend until the French, or until Rome, until Jannik Sinner comes back. And then Carlos has a bit more because he won Indian Wells last year. And so there is definitely an opening. I think Zverev will really want to capitalize on this opening, on these next few months. Doesn't have a tremendous amount to defend. I think that's something he will really zone into. He's playing in South America. He played in Argentina. He is playing now in Rio. So I think there is a big opportunity. I said at the Australian Open, before Carlos lost and after he lost to Novak, I think Carlos will have a tremendous year. And the reason I say that is he came out at the Australian Open and he made so many changes to his game. I was honestly shocked to see so many. That's what we also touched on with the rackets, right, Mitch? There are like these players are coming out of the off season. That is not really an off season anymore. They have like 2 weeks.
It's like two, yeah.
Yeah,
It's like summer camp.
Exactly. And they are coming out with all these changes. Carlos has adjusted his service motion. He returned inside the baseline on second serves on the hard courts. And I was so impressed with him. I thought I just saw something in him for this season. And I know it's tough to top a season where he won French Open and Wimbledon last year. Yeah. But there were some inconsistencies. I spoke to Juan Carlos Ferrero in Melbourne, and he said to me, we worked hard on getting him more consistent and more focused during these matches to not have so many dips. And I saw glimpses of that at the Australian Open. And that's why I think he will have a tremendous season and outperform his last season. And I think that's something we can look forward to, especially if Jannik comes back and plays as well as he has. Is going to be a great rivalry, and not to forget Fonseca and all of this.
Yeah, Fonseca Alcaraz, that's the talk of the internet, is when is that matchup going to take place and when's the first time? Because we know they're going to probably meet a bunch. But yeah, Alcaraz taking a step backward to take 2 steps forward, if that's the way you want to put it, is a great way. You know, similar to when Tiger Woods changed his swing, he's got bigger long-term goals ahead, and I'm with you. I think this is going to be another great season for Carlos. On the women's front, they're into Dubai. We saw some results as well. An American upset over a fellow American, McCartney Kessler, who's 25 and just a new pro. Took some time, played in college, had some success, wins the WTA event in Cleveland last year as a wild card, beats Coco Gauff. So Coco has another disappointing upset loss, but for Kessler, this is another big win for her. She's quickly into the top 40 and rising up the rankings.
Yeah, she is. Won Hobart earlier this year. So she's not 20 anymore, but considering that she played college, she is still very young on tour, and she's still, making her stride. She's still playing these top players for the first, second time, and she will just get better from here out on. And I actually called her match against Ons Jabeur in Doha and got to see her for the first time close up, and was very impressed with her athleticism, how solid she is, can really has some firepower off both wings. Really beautiful to watch her turn defense into offense as well, can really make something happen in defensive positions. So this is a fantastic win, the best win for her so far for Kessler. And for Coco, maybe worrying. I don't know. I don't want to really say. She had such a fantastic start to the season, now a bit slower in the Middle East. I wouldn't necessarily say it's worrying, but 2 early losses for her.
I would say timing of this portion of the schedule is tough to really fully gauge where they're at, especially maybe for an American that looks at the Sunshine Double with even bigger importance. So, and historically, she hasn't done well here, and she still had great seasons. So,
exactly,
it's 2 losses in a row. So we'll see. But yeah, Kessler, another American, just the American women are coming. It's crazy.
We had this stat last week where we showed that 17 American women are into the top 100, and I think 4 are in the top 10. I wanted to leave the room. I'm like, please don't. Yeah, don't bother me with these stats. I don't want to see it. We're like struggling for a top 50 player over in Germany, and then you're just showing off with your 17 in the top 100.
Any other, before I let you go, Andrea, any other players in this event that you're looking forward to? We saw Pegula get back to the court with the win. Iga thoroughly beat Azarenka, Azarenka, by the way, beat Kalinina. That was another one, 5-2, a set and 5-2 up for Kalinina. Was not able to win, so that's another tough one. But any other players you're looking at this week on the women's side?
Well, I'm looking for Aryna Sabalenka. I think it's no secret that I love her game, love her personality, and she had a tough loss against Alexandrova in Doha, is struggling with her serve a bit in these first 2 months of the season, is being broken more often than she did last year. So that's something to look forward to and see how she stabilizes herself, hopefully, in Dubai. And Jess Pegula, I honestly thought she had a big shot at winning Doha. Didn't quite close it out against Alexandrova, was up a set and had the chance to break her, and then it sort of slipped through her fingers. So I think she had potential to win Doha. Maybe it's her time to shine in Dubai.
Yeah, I forgot to mention too, I wasn't sure if you got a cat after all the run-ins that we saw, who you're on the broadcast for, all the cats that were making their appearance.
All the little, I don't know if it was the same one or multiple different kinds, but I hope they see. Well, let's see if they come out in the men's tournament as well.
We will see. Well, this is an exciting time of the year, Andrea Petkovic.
It
I always
is.
appreciate you coming on the show. Any updates in your life, any projects you're working on, things to promote? Now that you have such a following on this show that people look forward to hearing.
Oh, wow. I didn't know I had such a following. It's like my parents are listening to this, probably. Not even. So nothing new. I'll be back on Tennis Channel next week for the week of Acapulco. And my Substack, if you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, you can do so on Substack. It's called Finite Jest. And we talk about all jests that are finite.
Okay.
And tennis, of course.
That's a lot. The Substack's good. There's always a deep quote that circulates. There's always just something on the internet that circulates where it's like, what a great writer Andrea Petkovic is. And just as another aside, I will accept a copy of your book to display. I mean, even if it's in German and I can't read it, I will display it. And I'll get it into the rotation as well.
Okay,
so.
I will get you a copy.
Andrea Petkovic, thank you so much. Always welcome. Love our biannual catch-ups here on the show. All the best, and thanks a ton for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Mitch.
That was Andrea Petkovic. This is the Inside in Tennis podcast. Again, we're on the Believe Network, available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your shows. And follow my YouTube channel at Mitch Michals for the full video episode as well. More tennis to come. Another podcast later in the week. The grind doesn't stop. For Andrea Petkovic, I'm Mitch Michals. This was the Inside in Tennis podcast. Thanks for enjoying the show. We'll talk to you soon.